Folks getting out often set themselves up with false expectations, thinking either that the world owes them something or having encountered an idea that you can think yourself into success or happiness. But the truth is that you have a hard road and you have to work hard. There is no quick fix, and you won't be entitled to anything when you get out. In fact, you'll face harder barriers than those who weren't incarcerated. What you can control are what you think, the decisions that you make, and the actions that you take. Many things have traumatized us, and there have been many injustices. On the other hand, though, we have to take responsibility for our part. Despite what may have happened to us, we all have a certain degree of fault. We all played some part, as small as that may have been for some. In this video, and the accompanying exercise, we're going to consider what it might be that has been keeping us from living according to our values, keeping us from pursuing the healthy things that would allow us to have successful jobs, relationships, and hobbies. This is where we start learning about that conscious, healthy decision making. One of the hardest things to do in life is to sit down and really look at yourself. What you're doing now is heroic. Most people go through life without examining themselves, what their values really are, and whether their behaviors actually stems from those values. But we're taking the time to intentionally examine our values and how our behavior relates to this. There are people who are doing yoga, eating right, or going to church, but their lives don't actually reflect good values. This is hard work. To really examine what it is in our thinking that causes our values to not be reflected in our actions. If you see that your behavior is repeatedly not what you'd like it to be, or not what your family, friends, or coworkers would want it to be, you need to examine what your underlying thinking is that leads to that behavior and work on that thinking. Even if you find the person of your dreams or your dream job, if you're still stuck in those thinking errors, your behavior will end up ruining whatever has gone well for you. You'll end up back in a cell or without family. If you're operating from broken values or beliefs about yourself or about what the world owes you or how the world works, your behaviors will reflect this. The first step in fixing ourselves is to figure out the kind of thinking that we were engaging in that makes us feel really awful. On this course's page, you'll find a list of common thinking errors that's been used and validated for a long time by professionals. If you're coming to the center, we'll work together to go over this list as individuals and think about what might be lingering for each of us. If you're taking in this content without coming in, make sure to look through that list. Our version of the list has 16 thinking errors. First, there's black or white thinking. This is the tendency to see things as all or nothing. Things are either good or bad, right or wrong. You see things in terms of extremes. Something or someone is either great or awful, either perfect or a total failure. 2. There's mental filter. This is the tendency to focus on negative events while neglecting the positive. For example, in relationships, a person might dwell on a single negative comment made by the other person and view the relationship as hopelessly lost while ignoring the many positive comments and experiences. 3. Disqualifying the positive. This is a tendency to acknowledge positive experiences but downplay or reject them instead of embracing them. For example, a person who receives a positive review at work might reject the idea that they are a competent employee and attribute the positive review to political correctness. 4. Jumping to conclusions, mind reading, and fortune telling are tendencies to make irrational assumptions about people and circumstances. Mind reading is the inaccurate belief that we know what another person is thinking. Seeing a stranger with an unpleasant expression and jumping to the conclusion that they are thinking something negative about you is an example of this distortion. Fortune telling. Fortune telling is a sister distortion to mind reading. Fortune telling refers to the tendency to make conclusions and predictions based on little to no evidence and hold them as gospel truth. 5. Magnification and minimization. This is a tendency to magnify positive attributes of another person while minimizing your own positive attributes. You talk down all of your positive attributes and accomplishments in order to lower people's expectations. 6. Emotional reasoning. This is the tendency to interpret your experiences based on how you're feeling in the moment. It refers to the acceptance of one's emotions as fact. 7. Shoulding or musting statements. This is the tendency to make unrealistic and unreasonable demands on yourself and others. For example, you say, people should respect me. People should like me. People should give me a job. 8. Labeling and mislabeling. The tendency to make global statements about yourself or others based upon situation-specific behaviors. Instead of thinking he made a mistake, you might label your neighbor as an idiot. Labeling people and experiences places them into categories that are often based on isolated incidents. 9. Personalization. This is a tendency to interpret something that happens as resulting from something you did. If a friend doesn't call back, you may assume she must be mad at me. Or if a coworker is grumpy, you might conclude he doesn't like me, when really it has nothing to do with you. 10. Control fallacies. A control fallacy manifests as one of two beliefs. 1. That we have no control over our lives and are helpless victims of fate. Or 2. That we are in complete control of our lives and our surroundings, giving us responsibility for the feelings of those around us. 11. Fallacy of fairness. A person who judges every experience by its perceived fairness has fallen for the fairness fallacy and will likely feel anger, resentment, and hopelessness when they inevitably encounter a situation that is not fair. 12. Fallacy of change. Another fallacy distortion involves expecting others to change if we pressure or encourage them enough. 13. Always being right. This is the belief that we must always be right, correct, or accurate. We might never take responsibility for what goes wrong or admit when we've made a mistake or said something that was inaccurate. 14. Heaven's reward fallacy. This is the belief that one's struggles, one's suffering, and one's hard work will result in a just reward. 15. Catastrophizing. This is the tendency to blow circumstances out of proportion by making problems larger than they really are. 16. Overgeneralization. This is the tendency to make broad generalizations based upon a single event and minimal evidence. For instance, whenever you say that everyone always, she never, this is an overgeneralization. When I first went through a list of thinking errors, there were 26 thinking errors on that list. And how many do you think I had as I filled it out, sitting in the penitentiary? I had 22. And I could have walked out feeling hopeless. Here, you need to tap into that resilience that you all have because of what you've come through. In order to keep going and not give up, I picked the top 3. And then I chose to work on one in particular. And by fixing that one, I actually fixed about 15. We're just starting the healing process. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. But together, we're going to get there. Your challenge, your goal for now, at the beginning of this transitional time in your life, is to think about that one thing and work on that one thinking error for now. Just focus on what you can do to practice this one thing in your head and maybe start practicing it in your life. You can't wait for the situation to come to you. you should start thinking about these scenarios and visualizing the thinking and behavior that you want to enact in life over and over. Then, when these situations actually arise, you'll have practiced the behavior that you want to engage in. You'll be ready mentally. This practice, working towards challenging this one thinking error, will make it much easier to make changes in other areas of your life as well. You're building the mental muscles that you'll need going forward. Now, let's go over the activity that goes along with this video. When you've identified some of your main thinking errors, you can use one or two of them to complete the activity thinking report. Again, if you're coming into the center, we'll do this together, though it is a good idea to do it now on your own too. If you're not coming in, you want to complete it on your own. At the top of the page called Thinking Report, you're going to write down the thinking error that you chose. In the first column, you're going to examine a specific event. I'd like you to think of a specific event where you didn't act like you should have, something that ended up taking away something that is important to you. This event should be an example of the thinking error that you wrote at the top of the page. Think of a time when you did this thinking error. You're going to describe the event as if you're watching it happen instead of experiencing it happening. Write down the events of the story. Now, think about where you were thinking during that time. What beliefs were you operating from? What was the value that led to the way that you acted? Write that down in the left-hand top of the column on the back side of the page. What were you feeling at that time? What were the emotions that you had? Write that down in the bottom of the left-hand column on the back side of the page. Write down in the right-hand column on the front side of the page what would be different if you could do it over or if it ended up with a good result for you. What would you be feeling in that moment in order to get that good result? Write that down in the right bottom on the back side of the page. What thinking would you need to have in order to get to that feeling? Write that down in the top right on the back side of the page. Here, you might see that we can have two beliefs or values at one time. You can want to have a good marriage and still start a fight with your spouse. In life, we're constantly having to decide on what is most important at all times. This is called ambivalence. The concept that there are two things that you want at the same time. Living a healthy life is choosing the one of the two things that is healthier, that leads to our big values. You can see in that top left window a belief that you had that contradicts what you think your values really are. And we all have those contradicting beliefs and values. We want to feel good. We want to eat a lot of sugar. We want to have sex without a condom, etc. But there are alternatives to those desires that are healthier, and we want those two at the same time. So we're always choosing between those things. Importantly, you're not always going to be able to change your feelings or the emotional reactions that you have. It's your behavior that has to change, and that's easier if your thinking lines up with the right behavior. You might have a feeling, but you want to engage your brain in thinking through the action that comes next. When people are successful, there are some specific ways of thinking that help them to get there. First is affirmations, optimistic thinking about what can come from our hard work. Visualizations, imagining how we can accomplish the things that we want. Goals, making concrete goals to work toward the things that we want. And practice, starting to do the work towards those goals with patience and persistence. This brings us to the end of Fundamentals of Self Part 1. In the next part, we'll be talking about some of the proven ways that you can start the healing process, change your thinking, and control your decision making. The hard work has already started, And now we'll be looking at the solutions and putting them into practice.